Okay, let's talk about today's business matters. United Airlines will once again be landing in Tel Aviv. This comes after back-to-back pauses due to the unrest in the region. The airline suspended flights in May after a missile reached the Tel Aviv airport. Flights briefly resumed before Israel started a bombing campaign in mid-June that closed Israeli airspace. Major U.S. carriers, including United, Delta, and American Airlines, all suspended flights into Tel Aviv. United now plans to resume flights from Newark and New York to the Israeli city beginning July 21st. Now, Wendy's CEO is moving on to dessert at Hershey's. The burger chain announced that Kirk Tanner is leaving after just 1 year in the role. This comes as Wendy's has been struggling with muted sales. Hershey's has its own struggles as well, navigating tariff-related costs and high cocoa prices. Separate statements explain that Tanner will start on August 18th, a month after departing Wendy's. Hershey's current CEO, Michelle Buck, will retire and transition into a senior advisor role. And a survey suggests Americans are feeling more optimistic that inflation won't heat back up. That's according to a consumer report from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. There's been anxiety for months now about fast rising prices related to tariffs. But the survey found that anxiety eased a bit in June. Consumers' near-term inflation expectations fell for the second month in a row. It dropped to a 3% level, a return to where the year began. The June survey also showed that expectations about job security and income growth improved. But the report indicated that consumers expect their bank accounts to tighten up as spending expectations fell to January levels. And the Trump administration is extending a hiring freeze on federal civilian employees through October after a prior order was set to expire on July 15th. The freeze applies to the executive branch. Under the presidential memorandum President Trump signed on Monday, no vacant federal civilian positions can be filled and no new positions may be created. There are some exceptions, though, for military personnel and jobs related to immigration enforcement, national security, or public safety. The executive office of the president is also exempt. Meanwhile, instead of slashing prices more, homeowners are just pulling their listings. Data from Realtor.com shows delistings jumped 47% nationally in May. At the same time, there's been a spike in price reductions. A senior economist at Realtor.com explained that homeowners in the past felt pressure with falling prices, but today's homeowner is benefiting from record-high levels of home equity. That's why they have the flexibility to wait it out and will rather withdraw their home than reduce the price. From a worldwide social media platform to a decentralized chat app, the co-founder of Twitter has launched a new messaging service that works over Bluetooth. Here's more.
The man behind global posts under 140 characters is scaling down. Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey has just unveiled his new weekend project called BitChat. It's a decentralized messaging app that uses Bluetooth mesh networks. This means users can communicate through locally linked devices and does not require the internet. That means messages are harder to monitor and people can continue to communicate even if the internet shuts down. White papers describe the app as resilient to network outages and censorship. The papers explain that BitChat is an encrypted, temporary, peer-to-peer service that does not collect personal data or have any user tracking elements. The messages are sent directly to devices, and each device essentially works as a node to widen the network. BitChat is not the first to use this technology. Similar apps were used during pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, FireChat in 2014, and Bridgeify in 2022. Right now, BitChat is in beta testing, and Dorsey said it is being reviewed for broader release.
President Trump is now detailing more of his administration's wind and solar policies. Trump signed an executive order to curtail federal tax credits for these projects. Trump promised Republicans he would sign it in exchange for their support for his massive domestic policy bill that was passed last week. The bill included a last-minute provision that allowed clean energy developers more latitude to claim federal tax credits. Trump's executive order can't override the statute, but it does direct the Treasury Department to vigorously enforce whether wind and solar companies are sourcing their components from China. Samsung Electronics is expanding its mobile healthcare services business. The company is acquiring U.S. health company Xalth for an undisclosed amount. Samsung said it hopes to create synergy between its wearable technology and Xalth digital health platform. Xalth runs health programs and manages data that links patients with their care providers at more than 500 hospitals in the U.S. Samsung has been trying to diversify beyond its core semiconductor and smartphone business. A new chief medical officer and menopause support program for Weight Watchers. Dr. Kim Boyd is taking the role as the company emerges from bankruptcy. Part of its growth strategy is to help women manage the menopause transition. This will factor in the use of obesity medications like Wegovy and Zepbound. The program for perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause will include access to prescription treatments such as hormone replacement therapy and behavioral and nutritional support. Boyd described this as a natural overlap since 70% of women experience weight gain in the first stages of menopause. Weight Watchers has partnered with Novo Nordisk to sell Wegovy, as the FDA has ordered an end to compound versions. Genetic testing company 23andMe can proceed with a $305 million sale to the company's co-founder after a bankruptcy judge rejected California's bid to delay the sale. California wanted the sale to stall while it appeals over privacy concerns related to customers' genetic profiles. 23andMe filed for bankruptcy in March, seeking to sell its business after a drop-off in consumer demand and a 2023 data breach that exposed millions of customers' genetic data. California argued the sale violates the state's Genetic Information Privacy Act, which prohibits the transfer and disclosure of genetic data or biological samples to third parties. The 23andMe co-founder said customer genetic data would continue to be protected and privacy policies will remain. Several other states also opposed the sale but were overruled. The Chinese Communist regime is threatening the Trump administration over its plans to reimpose tariffs. China has until August 12th to reach a trade agreement with the White House, otherwise tariffs imposed in April and May will return. According to the Peterson Institute for International Economics, the average U.S. tariff on Chinese exports now stands at just over 51%. The Chinese regime is also threatening regional economies that are considering striking tariff reduction deals with the U.S. that would cut China out of their supply chains. Meanwhile, German luxury sports car maker Porsche said its sales fell in the first half of the year. It's blamed challenging market conditions and intense competition for its biggest dip, a 28% slump in the Chinese market. Here's more.
Sales at the car maker fell 6% globally, and it delivered more than 146,000 vehicles worldwide. North America proved to be a bright spot as sales grew by a tenth. Porsche's deliveries of electric vehicles also went up over 14% in the first half from a year earlier. The car maker said 36% of the vehicles delivered were electrified. Uncertain times continue for global car makers. On Monday, Mercedes-Benz said its second quarter unit sales of cars and vans fell 9%. The German giant blamed the impact of tariffs.
The Department of Energy says power outages could increase 100-fold in 5 years if suppliers fail to add capacity during peak demand. In a report, the agency says the Biden administration's energy policies were a major reason for the retirement of power plants and delays in their approving of replacements. The report also says the gap between electricity demand and supply is widening, particularly as artificial intelligence drives the need for more power-hungry data centers. The department says it expects 209 gigawatts of new electricity generation to be added by 2030 to replace power plant retirements, but only a portion of the new energy will come from power sources that provide a stable and continuous power supply. raising the risk of outages in several regions. And several airlines around the world have recently updated their rules concerning portable batteries carried onto planes. The updates follow a fire that destroyed a plane in South Korea in January, possibly sparked by a power bank containing lithium-ion batteries. The batteries power all kinds of devices, from phones to laptops and more. The risk is a battery that can heat quickly and possibly catch fire. Lithium-ion batteries are already banned from checked luggage. Now airlines are adding rules for use of batteries inside the cabin. Among U.S. airlines, Southwest took action in May to tweak its policy. The carrier banned passengers from charging devices using portable batteries while stowed in the overhead bin. Devices must be charged in plain sight. ExxonMobil signaled on Monday that lower oil and gas prices could cut its second quarter earnings by about $1.5 billion from the previous quarter's level. The earnings snapshot from the largest U.S. oil producer is closely watched for clues on how the broader oil sector will fare. Benchmark Brent crude prices declined 11% in the April to June quarter. More crude supply from the OPEC Plus group of producers weighed on prices. U.S. natural gas prices declined 9% from the first quarter. Exxon said in the regulatory filing that it will release the final quarterly results in August. On to markets. S&P 500 closed slightly lower today after a volatile session as investors waited more clarity on U.S. trade policy. So Trump announced a 50% tariff on imported copper and as well signaled more levies on semiconductors and pharmaceuticals. But despite uncertainty, markets held near record highs, with the Nasdaq inching up and the S&P 500 barely dipping. Solar stocks slid due to tax credit rollbacks in Trump's energy policies. And analysts from Bank of America and Goldman Sachs raised their S&P 500 year-end targets, citing strong earnings and reduced policy uncertainty. And that's it for today's Business Matters.